Hello students, welcome to English class. Today I am going to give you the explanation from your Prime English lesson number 10, lesson name Television. Basically, this is a poem written by Roald Dahl. Before giving you the detailed summary of this poem, let us know about the poet first. Roald Dahl is born in the year 1916 to 1919. He was a British novelist, poet, screenwriter, and pilot. He served in the Royal Air Force during World War II. He is known primarily for his works for children. He was one of the world's best-selling authors. He was awarded the 1983 World Fantasy Award for Life Achievement and the Children's Author of the Year by the British Book Awards in 1990. In 2008, the Times placed Dahl 16th on its list of the 50 greatest British writers since 1945. Now, student, can you see this picture? What does the picture represent? Why do you think that they are in danger of becoming obsolete? Do you think we are making a mistake by forgetting these old friends? Is there anything we can do to help them? Now these are the few questions which is coming up to the mind of Roald Dahl, and though through his poetry he want to convey that same message to his readers as well. Now Roald Dahl is one of the most prolific modern writers in English and is well known as the children's author. The poem Television is a famous poem of Dahl that advises and inspires to read books instead of watching the television. This is one of the most relevant poems of our time. The poem takes a comic look at a serious problem among young children today. It warns us about the dangers of watching television excessively. TV robs our minds of the power of imagination and creativity. Through his poetry, he advises us to read books as it will enable us to discover deeper levels of joy, find fulfillment in life, and open a whole new and exciting world for us. Now, student, this was a little gist which I have given you. Now, let's understand the poetry stanza-wise. Now, let us read a poem about the effects of television on young minds. Now, in the very first stanza, the most important thing we have learned so far as children are concerned is never, never let them near your television set. Or better still, just don't install the idiotic thing at all. Now, student, in the very first stanza, you have to understand that what Dahl is trying to convey through his poetry. Dahl advises from his experience that people should never ever allow their children to go near the television set. It is even better not to install the idiotic thing called television. But why is the television an idiotic thing, according to the poet? Throughout the entire poem, Dahl attempts to answer it. Now, the poem shares his experience. Now, through his poetry, he is just sharing his experience, and he's saying that what had happened while continuously watching a television. Please come to the second stanza. In almost every house we have been, we have watched them gaping at the screen. They loll and slop and lounge about and stare until their eyes pops out. Last week in someone's place, we saw a dozen eyeballs on the floor. Now in this stanza, the poet shares his experience here. In almost every house he has visited, he has watched children gasping at the screen. They were staring with their eyes wide open and with absolute concentration of mind. For sitting a long time before the television set, they became tired. Sometimes they sit or lie in a lazy and casual manner, that is, loll and slop and lounge about and get sloppy. But still they stare at the television until their eyes are too tired to watch anymore. It means their eyes pops out. All these are not Dahl's imagination. He indeed saw a dozen eyeballs, that is half a dozen children sitting on the floor at someone's house very recently, say last week. Now let's come to the next stanza, student. They sit and stare and stare and sit until they are hypnotized by it, until they are absolutely drunk with all that shocking, ghastly junk. Now, in these stanzas, student, it is very important to understand when the children are before a television set, they sit and stare. and stare and sit for long hours. They don't seem to be moving from there, as they probably forget everything around them in the real world. Rather, the one they watch on the television becomes real for the time being. They are almost hypnotized by this idiotic box. They are absolutely drunk. Their minds are filled with those shocking, ghastly junk which are mostly unreal and inappropriate for the age. Those TV shows kill their valuable time and make them lazy with no room for their physical play and exercise. They have no scope of spending time with books and nature and interacting with others. Their minds filled with images and stories of a virtual world are compared to drunk man's imaginary world in an apt metaphor here. Now let's come to the next stanza, student, to understand this poem in a detailed way. Oh, yes, we know it keeps them still. They don't climb out the window sill. They never fight or quick or punch. They leave you free to cook the lunch and wash the dishes in the sink. But did you ever stop to think, to wonder just exactly what this does to your beloved tot? Now, here, poet is addressing to parents. The poet now says that he knows that the television keeps the naughty children calm. When they are in front of a TV set, they no more do mischievous things, like climbing out the window sill, fighting, kicking, and punching. They let the mother free to cook the lunch and wash the dishes in the sink without any disturbance. But that can't be an excuse to let them sit before a TV, because the poet thinks that the idiotic device does more harm than the good. Now here poet is saying that it only harm the children, it will not give any kind of education to them. It rots the sense in the head, it kills imagination dead, it clogs and clutters up the mind, it makes a child so dull and blind, he can no longer understand a fantasy of fairyland. Now, in these lines, the poet speaker now asks the parents whether they are spent a moment to think exactly what harm this television does to their loving child. He himself answers it in a brilliant way. Watching the television regularly damages the sense in the head. Children are drawn away from the reality, the real world around him. He just believes what he watches without considering the context. His own environment hardly matches with the ones he sees on screen, but still he thinks all that are real and applicable to him. It also kills the power of imagination in the mind. Children start to live in a preset imaginary world that they see on the screen. They slowly lose their own creative thinking, their own imagination. Though what TV shows display are mostly fictional, that is a close imitation of the real world, not a completely different world as a fairy tale. Now, his brain, please come to the next stanza, student. His brain becomes as soft as cheese, his powers of thinking rust and freeze. He cannot think, he only sees. Now, Roald Dahl continues to argue on how television affects a child's mind. Children watch different shows on different channels. Sometimes there are contradictory ideas, sometimes it does not match with reality, and they are surprised. Thus, these things clog and clutter up the mind, mess up the organized ideas and thoughts. Moreover, the child forgets to think on his own. His entire mind is full of the images he has seen on the TV show. How would he get the time and scope to think over other things? His important time is wasted in the thoughts that are fictional and not related to his own life. Thus, his study and thoughts on how to improve his skills and personality are neglected. This is as if the child gradually becomes dull and blind. Now, let's come to the next stanza. All right, you'll cry, all right, you'll say. Now, his poet is saying, all right, you'll cry, all right, you'll say. But if we take the set away, what shall we do to entertain our darling children? Please explain. Now, here a very good question is coming up. Now, the poet says that he knows what the readers or especially the parents would ask him. The question is how parents shall entertain their affectionate children if they take the TV set away from them. The poet has the answer in the following lines. Now, he is answering. We'll answer this by asking you what use the darling ones to do, how use they keep themselves contented before this monster was invented. Have you forgotten? Don't you know? We'll say it very loud and slow. Now the poet answers the above question only by throwing a question. What people used to do to keep themselves entertained when television was not invented? TV set is a dread device, a monster to him. He wants people remind what they used to do in the absence of such a device. Now, the poet himself reminds us that children in earlier times used to read lots of books. Surprisingly, people then spend half of their lifetime by reading books. It's a great Scott Gozuk is an expression of surprise or amazement. Now, he's even telling us the name of the books also in these lines. They used to read, they are read and read and read and read and then proceed to read some more. Great Scott Gozzo, one half their lives was reading books. The nursery shelves held books galore, books cluttered up the nursery floor, and in the bedroom by the bed, more books were waiting to be read. Now he's saying in those earlier days, the nursery shelves were full of books. In nursery school, books remained scattered on the floor. Even in their home, the bedroom and the bed, books cluttered up everywhere. Such wondrous, fine, fantastic tales of dragons, gypsies, queens, and ways. Please come to the next slide. And once they start, oh boy, now, in these lines, first you have to understand that here the poet is saying the gypsies. Now, what does the line means? Gypsies, queens, and ways. Now, here the poet is saying that these are the these are the different name of the animals which is keeping out and mocking out by the names, and he's saying here the poet talks about the popular books of adventure that children used to read in his time. In those days, boys and girls read fantastic stories of dragons, gypsies, queens, whales, treasure, islands, smugglers, pirates, ships, elephant, cannibals, and so on. Now, I hope you have understood what poet is trying to convey through his poetry, and we'll continue. Yes, we'll continue with the more effect.